Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss best practices with machine learning and artificial intelligence strategies in the federal government. With me on today's show are Nan Multidimensional, Chief Technology Officer, Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, Department of Defense; Sunil Mahaduri, Acting Chief Technology Officer, U.S. Customs and Border Protection; Rachel Martin, Director of Artificial Intelligence, Automation and Augmentation, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency; Dr. Gil Alterovitz, Director of National Artificial Intelligence Institute, Department of Veterans Affairs; Henry Sowell, Chief Information Officer, Cloudera Government Solutions; Nick Saki, Principal Technology Strategist for Public Sector, Pure Storage; and John Dillon, Chief Executive Officer at Aerospike. Well, we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about machine learning. There's billions of IoT devices out there. We're hearing about yottabytes and bronobytes and certainly very advanced ways to transmit, store, and process data. And we've really entered into this age of performing artificial intelligence and machine learning, quite frankly, like never before. Let's start with you, Nan, over at the JAIC, as they call it. A lot of stuff going on over there. We're learning about JAIC 2.0 and the Joint Common Foundation. Sounds like you got a lot of cool stuff going on there. Give us a top line state of the state.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Well, as you said, there's just an absolutely a ton of stuff going on. I mean, AI is such a broad area and space that it's hard to speak about it in kind of one way, right? There isn't it's not a single technology. It's not a single set of algorithms. It's a wide technology space and then the implementation space as well. So the way we're approaching the problem is sort of multidimensional. So let me sort of try to quickly take you through those.
Sure.
First is really understanding and differentiating between mature and emerging parts of AI. So when you think of data types, things like text or natural language processing or other sort of data types, we feel that many of the algorithms there are ready to scale. These are things that you can implement all day long, with great business return. But as you get to some of the more interesting and harder things like full motion video object detection and things, those are still in research land. But at the same time, we're also now applying these things to things like tactical edge and warfighting, all the way from business intelligence operations to warfighter health, to humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, to predictive maintenance, to warfighting. So the scope and scale of it is very hard. So what you've really got to do is take the mature parts and focus on implementing those very quickly to get the big wins. What that also does is helps you build out the infrastructure and the data pipelines that you need to enable a lot of the other cool AI stuff to happen. And one of the jokes that I always have is, even though it sounds really cool to be at the DoD doing AI, most of the work that we end up doing is actually sewer and plumbing work. So, this is kind of a roto-rooter job, but it sounds really cool. But you have to lay those pipes and foundation before you can get to the really cool piece. And the last thing I'll throw in there is around infrastructure and the Joint Common Foundation. So the other big job for the JAIC is that we ourselves don't go to war. So our job is to enable every other part of the DoD to be effective. So a lot of our work that we do is building the foundational elements, like I talked about, the data elements, the infrastructure elements. And the JCF is built as a way of opening up and democratizing access to compute and data for our average, warfighter or DoD employee to bring an AI project. And we call them sort of citizen data developers or citizen data scientists to come in and do their work, which then opens up an entire, set of folks who are actually working on AI as well.
Yeah, you've really gone from this sort of SEAL Team 6 mode of spot sort of solutions to broadening that up and out and making all those capabilities available, as I like to say, sort of the pliers and the wires part of this thing, and making sure you enable the entire ecosystem there, which is fantastic to see that level of maturity happening over there at the JAIC. Sunil, how about at Customs and Border Protection? A lot of activity going on over there right now. I know you all are introducing AI and ML in a lot of different ways. Give us a top line state of the state.
Sure, absolutely. Hello, everybody. Sunil from CBP. I think Nan was right on, very similar to what Nan mentioned as to what we are doing also in that space within CBP. So I would classify from CBP perspective for AI machine learning into three or four broad areas, right? So as you know, we are the largest law enforcement agency in the country. I mean, people will be surprised, 65,000 people keeping the country safe. There's nothing more important than that. So because of that, we are also we do ingest a lot of data from not only data which we generate within CBP. Our job is to keep the borders open and legal travel and legal trade. That's our main job. So because of that, we do generate a lot of data, and we also ingest data from other agencies, which I can't go into that, but I'm just saying a lot of agencies also sending us data. Because of that, we do have tons of data which we try and figure out as to what is going to happen next, right? So currently, and even before, our main job was, hey, just make sure you're doing some transactional data comes in, you're doing processing of that, and you move on. But that is changing dramatically for us too. So AI machine learning is one of the core competencies for us. And way we are doing that is I've divided that into like a few parts. So if you look at data in general, it can divide into like data engineering component, but like Nan mentioned, keeping the data ready so that somebody can consume that. There's a data science component to that, where you're looking the scientists creating the models and the machine learning models you're building on top of that. So we have component of that also. But the third one which is important, is the operational piece, and that's where we are going into, and that's where the challenges are. And we are seeing, I'll give you an example of, think about the autonomous driving cars, right? So these cars, when you're driving, it has to come to a stop sign. When you see a stop, it's supposed to stop. So there are a bunch of cameras who are doing the work for that, and you're collecting the data together. But ultimately, the whole car has to work. The brake has to work so that you come to a stop, right? So that's one of the components we're looking at. Operational thing, I think, where the challenges are for us, I feel. We have also created what is a center of excellence, center of innovation for AI and machine learning. And the reason we have done that is we did not have any standards for doing annotating data or tagging data. So we are in the process of doing that. So think about, like Luke mentioned, with respect to the IoT devices, we have non-intrusive inspections from the border perspective. We collect a lot of data there, but if we tag the data correctly and annotate data correctly, including to create models on top of that, becomes an important for us.
Lot of moving. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, exactly. A lot of moving parts and
a lot of moving parts going on.
A lot of moving parts, and that's where we have challenges right now, Luke, because we are finding operational piece is where the difficult piece is. Collecting data, everything else is easier. We have lots of companies, a lot of different cool companies we work with who have off-the-shelf product which we can use. Sure. At the end of the day, the operational piece, the data, if you are putting in the data which you're collecting is not useful anymore, you are pretty much, you're pretty much giving wrong information to our operators. So that's
absolutely, why to make sure it's you collect it all and that it's very accurate. A lot of moving parts over there. CBP being right smack in the middle of the economy of United States of America, quite frankly, and globally. Rachel, how about over at National Geospatial and Intelligence Agency, NGA? I know there is just an absolutely incredible amount of data that you all process over there and collect, and I'm sure you're doing all kinds of stuff in the AI arena.
Yes, of course. And it's interesting. Certainly one of our big challenges is that volume of data, not just, of course, the GeoInt capabilities that the US government owns, but really the proliferation of commercial options in this area. We're, I think, at an inflection point where we simply can't keep up with the amount of information that we're receiving, whether it's still imagery or as non-referenced motion video. There's just too much of it for us to be able to rely on humans to continue to process. And so investment in AI technologies, or as we call them at NGA, AAA, AI automation and augmentation, is really a cornerstone of the director's strategy for achieving what he calls our moonshot. And but I'll say it's interesting, you think about what NGA receives for data, and of course we immediately go to imagery or to pixels as the primary kind of data that we need to manage. But honestly, there's actually a huge realm of other kinds of information, other kinds of data, less structured data that we still also need to manage. I don't think we're unique to DoD or the federal government in that respect. Beyond our role, in terms of imagery, of course, we have other responsibilities that we have to meet. A good example is aeronautical publications. We're responsible for updating something around 250,000 pages of updates to aeronautical instructions every month, and for DoD and for other aviation related agencies in the federal government. And that's a tremendous amount of text to go through. So, I think it's important to highlight that it's not just an imagery, it's not just a motion problem set that we're dealing with, but we also have unstructured data challenges, just like I think everybody else does as well.
Wow, I never knew that you all were involved with that type of aeronautical stuff. That's interesting, very fascinating. Perhaps we'll hear more about that. Gil, how about over at VA? I know there's a whole bunch of activity going on over there. I think every veteran is delighted to hear that you're using these advanced technologies to sort of further that capability and deliver those services. Tell us what's happening at VA.
Yes, so there's a lot going on, and I think when we think about some of the ways that we're going about looking at that and leveraging that, we're creating and leveraging the national strategy. So that's involving collecting and creating different use cases. There's the data analytics work group of the Data Governance Council has been a way to engage and work toward an AI strategy as well, and to gather inputs from different offices and work together. There's also recently been a framework on trustworthy AI that came out nationally, and that across agencies, and we're defining that for what it means and how it can be leveraged regarding veterans and use cases there. So there are kind of three areas that we're working on overall and across different offices, that making progress in that I've seen in the last few months that are going to enable AI going forward, and these include a number of different ways and platforms for computing, which is important, for artificial intelligence, so that different types of use cases can be taken on compared to what may have been possible in the past. Another area is developing the workforce, both internally as well as recruiting from externally. That's very important to actualizing and then eventually implementing these results. And of course, as was mentioned by one of the panelists, data is quite important, and information derived from that data. And so leveraging that within the VA and finding ways of doing so that protects the privacy of veterans, whether it be when that data and different models are used around these different use cases, is important as well. And then as we look forward, there's a number of different new approaches and research going on into how those can be used, and then in making sure that work can go very seamlessly into piloting and deploying, so that those benefits can be seen as soon as possible. We've stood up the AI Tech Sprint as one way to do that, to work with industry on priority issues for veterans and with veterans input, and also a veteran engagement board. So those are some of the areas that we're starting to make progress on, and seeing some initial results as well.
Fascinating. A lot of activity going on over at VA, and certainly as we talked about, a lot of data being created, which certainly has to be transmitted, certainly has to be stored, has to be processed and protected properly. And I know that some of our partners are in the middle of doing that. Henry, how about over at Cloudera? I know you're part of that solution to make that available for these agencies. What are you seeing across the spectrum here?
Yeah, everything that the panelists have said so far hits home for me, right? We're maniacally focused on mission impact, and so when you look at the full data management lifecycle that you have to do to be able to feed a proper data science practice, it's quite complex. So how do you manage scale? How do you manage ingest? How do you make sure that you're prepared for data engineering? And like Rachel said, you have a variety of different pieces. So a lot of point solutions can address a part of that, but how do you bring it together? How do you ensure that it's governed and secured? These are all things that we're really focused on. I think one of the interesting things that we've recently done here in the last 6 months, we had a major partnership with NVIDIA to bring GPUs and help bring scale to that with our platform. And we're working with a government agency right now as a high priority item to take their existing machine learning training workloads and see what we can do. And we've already seen a 3 to 5x improvement in performance. And when you really start thinking about mission, that is actually just time to value, right? Like how do we iterate quicker? Because when you look at a lot of these production workloads, very few are actually making it to production. You're talking about 35% actually make it to production. So how do you shorten that cycle so that you can continue to iterate and be successful? And that's some of our biggest focus right now.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of exciting things going on over there, and I'm glad to see that all this contribution going into enabling the ecosystem. Nick, how about over at Pure Storage? Undoubtedly, you all must be on fire over there trying to store all this stuff properly, have high-speed access back into that capability. Tell us what's happening. What do you see from your vantage point?
Thanks, Luke. We recognized several years ago that the needs for dynamic data service in an AI-driven enterprise were going to be radically different than what legacy technologies had heretofore been able to deliver. The scale, the volume, the velocity, the variety of data service and data access patterns and artificial intelligence infrastructures is simply radically different in terms of scale and velocity compared to legacy database and virtualization workloads. So we created, along with NVIDIA, an infrastructure platform called AIRI, or Artificial Intelligence Ready Infrastructure, specifically suited to the types of machine learning and deep learning data access patterns. And data and AI architectures and machine learning operations is highly dynamic. A storage array isn't someplace where you dump data and it's never seen or heard from again. I think that if anything, the artificial intelligence era has taught us that data is the new oil. And what we've built is a refinery for actually accelerating the time to value and the time to utility of that data to improve AI algorithm training and, of course, shortening the timeline to production. So we're very pleased that that message has, and that ability has resonated across the federal government and resulted in the adoption of dedicated platforms for doing this kind of work. And we're seeing that trend broadly across the entire industry, or really the entire operational space for enterprise infrastructure. In this architecture, data service has to be incredibly fast and agile, but it also has to be almost invisible. You want to get the infrastructure out of the way so data scientists can actually focus on building models, about delivering capability, about iterating the models, and training the AI. So you need a better mousetrap to do this type of thing.
Right.
One more thing we've seen, and really the last thing is, this effort has really emphasized that the need for infrastructure and data movement has to easily span on-premises infrastructure and utility computing infrastructure, or cloud. So you have to build a set of data services within the architecture, or leverage them, so that you can seamlessly move your algorithms to the workload, or algorithms to the data, or move the data to the algorithms. It's much more efficient to move the algorithms to the data than it is to try and do the reverse, simply because of data gravity. So that's been our focus, is how do we enable this? And we've had tremendously positive response from a number of customers within the national security space across the DoD. And of course, we've been very successful in biomedical research and in other areas. And we're just very proud to have seen this coming and created the capacity for addressing this new type of workload.
As you should be, and I tell you, it's very important. We've seemed to have moved away from, you know, the data scientists trying to wrestle and get themselves into an environment to actually perform the role of a data scientist and really just wake up and do the job, so to speak, which I think is fantastic. Definitely shows a level of maturity. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.